thank you for joining us in today's discussion. I'm very honored to introduce Sultan Qasmi, who is the founder of Barjeel Foundation and the patron and champion of modern and contemporary Arab art. He's also a columnist, a researcher, and he's someone who has an impeccable imprint and change in the support of the art from the region. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the context that we are in today. We are here at the Main Art Fair presenting the works of 100% women artists. And in today's talk, we are gonna look back 5 years have been passed since Sultan Qasmi has made a conscious effort and decision to work on the gender parity in the Barjeel art collection. So Sultan, it's been 5 years. We would love, before we go into the presentation, I would love for us to also, bearing in mind the context of the art fair today, of how this kind of align with what you do at the Art Foundation, and would love how the journey has been for you in terms of acquiring the works of women artists and so on to work on the gender parity.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I just want to thank Laure and the people behind this fair. My talk is not really about social political art by Arab women artists. It's about rebalancing the collection. A collection that started almost 22 years ago, rebalancing it to make sure that it's gender balanced, that it includes an equal number of male and female artists, and hopefully more women artists than male artists one day. But I want to begin by acknowledging this is a Middle Eastern art fair, and that my thoughts are with our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Sudan, everywhere, Beirut. Honestly, Beirut is in our hearts. We're really thinking about the terrible terrorism that's happening there by that vicious country that is really attacking it non-stop, but we will continue with art for now. So, I want to begin and show you this image. This is a lovely hang, beautiful display of art, but there's something terribly imbalanced with this image. Honestly, when I look at it, it warms my heart, but in the reality, this is an imbalanced image because it only includes, let me count, a grand total of 1 work by a woman. So you see all these beautiful artworks, really masterpieces, I think, from the Middle East and North Africa, but there's only 1 woman artist. And this is what Barjeel looked like in 2014, right? 2014. So I want to show you that the journey that we took has taken us to some of the most important exhibitions of women artists, borrowing works from us. So in this image, this is an exhibition called Action, Gesture, Paint, Women Artists in the Global Abstraction, from the 40s to the late 60s, and it includes works by Nadia Say Ali from Lebanon, includes works by Hélène Khal, also from Lebanon, and by Maliha Afnan from Palestine, Iran. And so I want to show you that we went from 1 work by women into honestly exhibitions that are more or less borrowing works from Barjeel because of our focus on women artists. But investing in women art isn't just about buying pretty artworks. Yes, there's a lot of pretty works, but the reality is that there's a lot of investment that goes behind the scene before you display the work, including this stunning artwork that is being lovingly restored by Elena Romero, a Spanish conservator based in the UAE. And this is the restoration of a 1967 work by an Algerian artist called Jamila bint Muhammad, who's slowly gaining prominence. Unfortunately, she just passed away last year, but Jamila bint Muhammad is no less than some of the major names that you know of Inji Aflatun, of Beya, and many other artists. She was an artist who was jailed by the, is it the Beret Rouge? Which what was the French terrorist organization in Algeria? The Beret Rouge. So there was this French militant organization that was terrorizing Algerians, and she was jailed by that organization, spent years in jail, and there's very little information about her. So here we are restoring her work, which ended up being shown in Paris and elsewhere. This is what it looked like after it was so clean. So again, sometimes you buy an artwork, but it takes you a year before you end up being able to show it. In this case, we ended up buying this work by Tamam al-Akhal, who is a Palestinian artist who lived in Beirut in the 1970s. And when she was in Riha, in Jericho, in the early 70s, she painted this gentleman called Sleiman, who was a laborer. And she took the work with her to Lebanon. And unfortunately, during the Lebanese civil war in the mid-70s, there was a shrapnel that exploded and the work was heavily damaged. And as you can see, a shrapnel went right through the forehead of the individual portrait. And when we bought the work, the artist said, well, the work is damaged, let me restore it for you. And we said, no, actually keep it. We think that this tells a story of the Middle East. The work, honestly, is not too damaged. You can still see it. So we decided to put it in a plexiglass. And so it's become at once an artwork and an artifact telling you the story of the Middle East. Now, some of you might fault me and say, well, no, you should restore it. Maybe one day we may fully restore it. But for now, we like to show that work the way it is because it tells the story of a Palestinian in Lebanon and all the circumstances that the work has gone through. This is the work that we are now restoring. It's taking a year to restore. It's a work by Fatem Toubasi, who is a Palestinian artist who studied in St. Petersburg in the early 1980s. And this painting called The Martyr, it's a monumental work, 2 meters high by 2 meters wide. And it tells the story of a young Palestinian martyr who was killed by Israeli terrorist forces in the West Bank in the early 1980s. This is the story of expanding Barjeel's collection. I want to show you now a list of, let me take you back before the list. I want to show you that in 2019 we came up with this statement and we said that we will never show less than 50% works by women in our display. And the problem with the Middle East is that we import a lot of good from the West, but also a lot of bad. So a lot of bad habits from the West. Unfortunately, Western museums are, how do I say, they're very biased against women. So if you go to all the major Western museums, whether it's I don't want to say names of museums because we're here in Paris, all of them, they show you 10 and 20% works by women. And sometimes when they're very forward thinking, they show you maybe 25% works by women. But in reality, we thought we would make a huge leap forward and have the Middle Eastern institutions teach the West a thing or two about the respect of women for a change. And so we decided to never show less than 50% works by women. And so when I did this, in August 2019, it was very controversial. Actually, I had a few women scholars who came to me and said, no, you shouldn't show equal number of women and men. And I thought, but I thought you're my allies. I thought I'll call you to support me. And they said, well, I think we have a point. And the point is that women didn't get equal number of opportunities to men. So if there's 100 scholarships that were given in 1950, 90% would go to men. So how could you show an equal number of male and female? You're doing a disservice to women. You're showing women to be less versatile and less good artists. So I listened to these scholars who I respect, and then I decided to ignore them. And I said, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's see, can we challenge ourselves and show an equal number of male and female? And I will show you in this presentation that it did make sense. Why? I'll tell you in 10 minutes why it made sense to take this leap of faith to show an equal number of male and female. I also want to say that it makes economic sense to invest in women. It makes economic sense because sometimes women are undervalued more than men. I don't know why. I always think of the story of Jawad Salim and his sister Naziha Salim. Jawad sells for $1 million, $2 million, and Naziha Salim was also a great artist, sells for $10,000. So was he really, I can't do the math, 100 times better than her? I'm not so sure. So, and they were both co-founders of the Baghdad art movement. So I always think of them. But in this case, this is an artwork that we acquired from a gallery here that's being represented in Mina Art Fair Gallery Bawa, based in Kuwait, of a Saudi artist called Alia Al-Ahmad, with a very young artist. And we acquired Shadow, which is on display in the museum in Sharjah. And I was pleasantly surprised and very fortunate that we had acquired her before this incredible increase in her price, over 300% in a period of, I think, a year or two. So it makes economic and financial sense to invest in women artists. But this is an image to show you the number of women artists in the Barjeel collection. You saw we went from one, and 10 years ago to here, 113. By the way, this is from 6 months ago. So now there's maybe another 20 or 30 names. So we are really going in a very, very fast speed, warp speed of investing in women art. I bet you some of these names you may have never heard of them. Maybe the Syrians know some of the Syrians, the Egyptians know some of the Egyptians, but there are names like Suad Malhas, I don't know, Rabab Nimr, Odile Mazloum, some of you know her. So all these individuals that we invest in and show, even Safiya Farhat, of course, but she's very famous. And as you see, the blue color is just from the last year. These are the artists that we included in 2023 alone. So we are really galloping towards gender parity in the collection. Let me tell you, the last display of Barjeel, we were lying and telling people it's 50-50, but we had 58% women and 42% male. So that was a very interesting experiment. So I'm showing you an image that has never been shown in public before. This is the very first time ever that a photo of Zulfa Saadi is ever shown in public. Never, ever, ever before has an image of Zulfa Saadi been shown in public. Who was Zulfa Saadi? She was a Palestinian student of Nicola As-Sayegh. Nicola As-Sayegh was one of the pioneer Palestinian artists. He painted a lot of churches, he painted a lot of icons, and he taught Zulfa Saadi, who was born in 1905 or 1906. And in many cases, she copied her teacher's work, but then she ventured to painting her own work. On the left, you see the tomb of Absalom, or in Arabic, we call it Tantur Fir'aun. And then you see an image of a shepherd who really is a representation of Jesus for many people in Palestine, who is the shepherd. And other images of Palestinians. So Palestinians are recording what life was like. Now, why is she important? Is because a lot of scholars tell you that before 1948, before the Nakba, that there was no exhibitions of Palestinians. But Zulfa Saadi destroys that notion because she showed a solo exhibition in Jerusalem in 1931. So this shows you that, you know, the Zionist propaganda about Palestine is all a load of bullshit, because Palestine has a very vibrant artistic community. But I want to show you this picture with her, honestly a stunning photo of Zulfa Saadi with her husband Saif al-Din al-Dijani. They lived in Syria after the Nakba of 1948. Another artist that we recently acquired thanks to George Al-A'ma is Lydia Atta. Very little is known about her. There's no image of her. We don't even know where she studied. But we do have her date of birth and passing. It took a while to get it, but no information at all about her work. But look how beautiful this painting is. Again, probably dated to around 1930. So again, taking modernism back at least a generation or two. Another artist that is very proudly part of the collection was a Turkic Iraqi artist who became Lebanese, Muazzaz Rawda, who was an artist that invested so much in herself, became an artist at the age of 49. So those of you who think that, you know, it's late to be an artist, that's not true. You could always become an artist. What's interesting about Muazzaz, and this image is thanks to Galerie Janine Roubaix, was from a Lebanese newspaper from the 30s. She was the first woman to drive in Lebanon. So in addition to being a pioneer artist, but she was also a pioneer woman in general. Apparently, she also had a gun license, but I won't talk about that part of her life. I also believe that Muazzaz Rawda was one of the first female artists in the Middle East and North Africa to have public monuments. So you see from the 1960s, she was doing public monuments. Now when you think of urbanism in the Arab world, a lot of it is drawn by men. But where did women start coming into the urban landscape? And maybe this is in the 1950s and 60s by Muazzaz Rawda. You see on the right the sculpture titled Debka, that she created probably sometime in the 1960s. Moving on, here is the work of Muazzaz at the Sharjah Art Museum that we have acquired. A recent discovery by us is this woman, Nazak Hamdi, who, her story is fascinating because a lot of people assume that Middle Easterners had to go to the West to study and become artists, but Nazak shows you that a lot of people went to the East. So Nazak actually studied in India in the 1950s, where she got her PhD in West Bengal, and she left a lot of murals there. And as you see here, she's painted this lotus girl, where she uses the symbol of the lotus, which is the common national flower of both her home country of Egypt and her adopted country of India. So it's a very, very smart way of linking Egypt and India. So Nazak Hamdi, what's really interesting about her, not only is that she studied in India, but she came back and she taught in Egypt, in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia. So she is a modernist who influenced generations of artists in several countries in the Middle East. This artwork we acquired, and honest to God, within less than 1 year, she is showing in the Venice Biennial. This is somebody who people have never heard of before. I have never heard of her. But just to show you, once you put women in the limelight, that the curator of the Venice Biennial thought of her work of being so important that it deserved to be amongst the masters. It's hanging close to Frida Kahlo. Incredible, incredible, really. So, by the way, I noticed that a lot of art critics were unhappy with the Venice Biennial. The New York Times wrote a review criticizing Venice Biennial, but it's because it's the first time that people who are brown saw artists who are brown. And I think a lot of people felt a bit uncomfortable that they don't see typical artists that they recognize. But that's a different story. This is a display of the Barjeel wing in the Sharjah Art Museum. Now, I told you that women didn't get an equal number of scholarships, but what did women do? Women really expanded modernity. If they didn't get to study with some of the most important teachers and institutions, what they did is they taught themselves. They, like the Saudi sociologist, PhD in sociology, Muna al-Munajjid. Muna al-Munajjid works on silk. She works on like the batik style guta, and she's self-taught, but I mean, her work is incredible, as you can see. This takes a long time. I'm not sure that many men can make this. On the right, you have Atiyat al-Ahwal from Egypt, working on brass. So now you see silk, you see brass, you see a lot of ceramic reliefs. Nuha al-Radi from Iraq on the left, and on the right, Vera Tamari of Palestine. Of course, Paris-based Nadia Sayali, a pioneer in light art. Let me tell you, a famous light festival in the Gulf asked me to be on their board. I'm saying this for the first time. And I told them I will not accept to be on your board unless you show a work by Nadia Sayali. And they didn't, so I refused to be on their board of the institution. They told me we have James Torrell, we have Dan Flavin, and I said not impressed, not impressed, not impressed. Why don't you have Nadia Sayali? And hopefully I'm saying this publicly so that the next people who work on the famous art festival in the Gulf, that they actually wake up and realize that we need to be our own allies. We can't keep importing Western artists. Respect to Western artists, but also equal respect, maybe a bit more, to Middle Eastern artists. Okay, so for no reason I'm showing you the amazing work of Munira Nusaybe, who works on sand. I mean, what is one thing in the Middle East we have a lot of? Really, okay? So sun and sand. Anyway, going forward, I want to talk about the perils, the problems of investing in Middle Eastern women artists. Unfortunately, what I've encountered is because people hear that Sultan is interested or Barjeel is interested in buying works by women artists, I'm getting a lot of forgeries. So I say this, unfortunately, a couple of times from Egypt, a couple of times from Tunisia, a couple of times from other countries, I'm getting forgeries. And what happens is that people acquire works by male artists, they scratch the name and they sign it by a woman artist. Not good, not cool, something that shouldn't be done. In this case, I have a lot of examples, but the only one I'm going to speak about publicly is this one. This is a work we thought by Gazbiya Sirri that we acquired a while ago, and Gazbiya, before she passed away, sent us this letter and said, this is not my artwork. So this actually is very helpful because the artist was alive, but in many cases, unfortunately, we're encountering a lot of forgeries. And this happens because people know that we are so keen on investing on women art. So yes, buy works by women artists, but do your own homework. Make sure that you're careful when you invest in women art. I'm going to show you one last thing before I hand over to Wadha, who's been very patient. About 10 years ago, we acquired this, what I think is a masterpiece. Are you ready? This is an incredible work, okay? This is a work by Syrian artist Mahmoud Hamad. Do you know Mahmoud Hamad? Mahmoud, did he teach you in school? درسك Mahmoud Hamad, he taught him. So Mahmoud Hamad is one of the great Syrian modernists. He created this work in 1988. The year he passed, he died later in the year. He finished this work called The Muslim or the Islamic Scientist, showing you some of the most incredible Muslim scientists from Andalusia, from Iran, from Turkey, from India, North Africa, Egypt, Abbas bin Firnas, Al-Razi, Al-Khawarizmi, you name it, they're all here. It's an incredible work. No problem, except one problem. What is the issue with this work? Not a single woman. Not a single woman. Now, I mean, the artist, he did well, يعني, as we say, يعطيه العافية, Allah يرحمه, يعني. Allah يرحمه, يعطيهم العافية, whoever tries to do something creative. But we thought, why don't we try to balance this picture? What can we do to find a counterbalance to this image? Were there 0 women scientists in the Muslim history? Were there 0 women who contributed to science? So I'm going to be showing you for the first time ever, a work that's been commissioned over a year and a half ago. I've never seen it with my eyes. It is somewhere here in Europe. I won't tell you where, but you're going to find out in a minute. We're going to get it shipped next month to the UAE in the next image. One of the most important living modern women artists from the Arab world, studied in the Soviet Union, in Surikov Academy in the 1970s, so an equal master of work. And we asked her, we said, we want you to create a balance, a work that showcases Muslim women artists from all over the Muslim world, and to show the role of women in modernity, and not only modernity, in science. Are you ready? Okay, so 3, 2, 1. This is Afifa Laibi's Muslim Scientist, which I've never seen myself, but it's absolutely incredible. So you see some leading women who have contributed to founding of libraries, creating astrolabs, building forts, creating drawings, maps, cartographers, doctors. I mean, also what I really love about her, and I never asked her for this, she added a child. And I feel like that was a swipe at men. There's something we can do that none of you can do. We can bear children. And I thought that, wow, Afifa, wow, respect. That really is a master stroke by the artist. And so, honestly, the journey of investing in women goes beyond just buying a pretty artwork and hanging it. It's doing the scholarship, investing, commissioning, exhibiting, repairing works. And I hope that we are really starting the process, but we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sultan. Thank you for the wonderful presentation and the wonderful surprise. I think we all feel privileged here to have seen this work firsthand. So thank you. I would like to go back to some of the points that you have brought up in the presentation. Obviously, it is important to invest in women artists, acknowledge them, celebrate their work. I want to know, ever since you have made the decision to work on the gender parity in the collection, how do you see the role of women artists, not in terms of gender representation, but rather in the canon of art history, in the socio-political statements that they kind of make and convey with their work? Would like to know, like, your impression about how that role kind of have changed in general within the frame of your art collection. Yes.
Honestly, it's a ongoing process. We're still learning. You know, people come to me and say, "Do you know that women artist?" And I say no, and they say, "Well, you pretend that you know about women artists." I'm like, that's actually a good thing. It shows you that we're still learning, even after all these years. But I think that women artists teach us a lot. First of all, they show us intimate images that men have no access to. For example, if you think of the artist really that we just lost last week, was it in Saudi, Safiya bin Zagr of Saudi, of Jeddah. Safiya depicted women, very intimate spaces of women, like for example the pre-wedding ceremonies of henna, that a man has no access to. And even us, we have no access to that world. So women give us access to a world. Of course, you can't take a picture, you really can't take a photograph. And so this is the closest we can get. Kamala Ibrahim depicting the Zar ceremony. This is a ceremony that is only open to women. So us men can't enter, but even the general public can't go. So I think we're learning a lot, but also learning about politics by women. Of course, Inji Aflatun, who's represented upstairs in Picasso Gallery, I believe, and Gazbiya Sirri was also here. These women showcased political events in Egyptian history that show you that they had a say. And in those days, women were given the vote. And so it's important to think about the political moment, a moment in which women feel empowered. But this moment was not built by Abdel Nasser. This moment was built by Huda Sha'rawi, by Durriya Shafiq. This is a moment of women, by Inji herself, a moment that women have grabbed, a moment that women have set the ground for. So it wasn't really given by men, it was taken. The right was taken by women.
Wonderful. I was also very touched by one of the works that you have shown in the presentation, which is the work titled Sleiman by Tamam al-Akhal. It's obviously, I think it is timeless in the sense that it's relevant to what we are enduring, what Palestinians are enduring, what the region is enduring. I also recall another work by Salwa Dash'ir from the Sursut Museum that was also damaged, and the family of the artist has made a decision to not restore the work but keep it as it is, as a witness of history. And so I want to know about, you have a private foundation, and you make a lot of these efforts to and make a lot of these decisions to celebrate these histories and so on. You're setting a precedent for a lot of institutions. I want to know, like, working with institutions, you've been touring a lot of the Barjeel curated shows across the world. Along the journey, I want to know if any of these institutions have adapted any of the strategies and decision making that Barjeel has been so keen and setting an exemplary to lead with.
So I really think that this, first of all, going back to the work that you mentioned, Sleiman, the work Sleiman, I think it's very representative of the region. The fact is that a lesser known artist, a female artist, Palestinian, but also shows you cultural destruction I mean, you just think of places like Sudan, and Yemen, and Iraq, and Syria, and Lebanon, my God, Palestine, Libya, so much, I hope I'm not forgetting, so much of the region has been affected by cultural destruction. Much of it is on purpose. So you know when the Israelis invaded Beirut twice in the late 70s, early 80s, they went straight for the PLO headquarters. Of course, they ransacked and stole a lot of the documents and newspapers, but they destroyed a lot of art. We know the stories of Sleiman Mansour, how many works that the Israelis steal and destroy by him. And there's so many examples that I can't even recall. But in this case, this work shows you the damage that works that still exist have endured. And so what is our role as people who are working in the cultural field? We should study them, we should exhibit them, we should, I don't know, maybe repair them one day. Maybe this is somebody else's job. I won't live forever. Maybe after I die, somebody will buy this work and then say, Sultan was stupid, he should have restored it, this work should be restored. It's up to them. I always think of myself as the guardian and not the owner of this work. I've never been, and I challenge anyone to find the quote where I said, I bought a work or I own a work. I always say Barjeel has acquired, we have acquired, we have been entrusted with a work. Because how long will I live? These works will hopefully outlive us. So we have to make sure that our eye is towards the future, 50 and 100 years and beyond. But did any institution learn from us? Sadly not. I can't tell you the number of times that museums email us to borrow works by men, and I say, well, this is also a great woman artist. It's so difficult. People are set in their gender bias. People are set in, but you need to show them the important male artists. Yes, but there were women artists. Unfortunately, if I show you the number of emails I sent to museums trying to convince them, in one of the museums, the curator and I wrote 2 pages about why the works of women artists should be shown and why they're relevant. They didn't take any. And so there's a gender balance that all of us are fighting against. Of course, there's a Middle Eastern bias. Let me tell you the number of museums that don't borrow from the Middle Eastern artists. And so it's a challenge, I think, that all of us here care about the Middle East. Even if we're French, if we're Arab, if we're European, we all care about the Middle East, which is why we're here.
Also, Sultan, I want to know, how do you find, now the number of artists have accumulated to 113 and even more, I believe you have 20 more artists by now, right? So this could be, I don't know, maybe you have like 130 plus artists, women artists in your collection. But how does one find women artists if they're not acknowledged by institutions, if they're not presented at art fairs, if they are not, if they're not in our field of scholarship, if they're not published, if they're not, yeah.
I'll show you something. I'll show you. Look at the crowd now, okay? Hands up here if you have heard of number 62, Umayya Alia Subra. Hands up if you've heard of her. Okay, let's try. Hands up if you've never heard of Umayya Alia Subra. Let's see if they're paying attention. Hands up if you've never heard of her. So, by the way, that was me a year ago. I've never heard of her before. But what happened is that some visitor came to the museum and said, how come you don't have a work of Umayya? I said, who's Umayya? He said, she's a very important modernist, studied in Florence in the 1970s. She's a pioneer in minimalism and pointillism. And I said, I don't know anything about her. So we got in touch with the family and acquired. They actually gifted us a work, and we acquired a work. And so it's a process of keeping a mind open, an eye open, an ear open. But I also have secret buyers. I have secret buyers in Libya. I have buyers in Algeria, buyers in Syria, in Palestine, in Iraq, in Egypt. Where else? Qatar soon. No, but these are people who actually go around looking at books, looking at catalogs, countries that I can't travel to all the time in many cases. So secret buyers, and honestly, a lot of the people who are here, friends who support us here. I want to say a shout out to Kaleem Bishara. Where's Kaleem? Kaleem, I don't know Kaleem. Kaleem is here, but Kaleem has been a huge supporter. He's gifted us a work by a female artist. So we've been very fortunate we've been very fortunate to have a lot of supporters here from the public who have been very helpful in our journey to discover works by women artists.
How can we continue to have that gift, to be basically gifted to, like, how can we have the gift that keeps on giving? How could institutions get access and a hold of these artists? This is, like a question that a lot of people would think of. And I think we're here in a very good place to start from. I think, in terms of the art markets, it plays a major role in acknowledging the value of women artists, and acknowledging their presence and the importance of them being acquired by private collectors, by institutions, and so on. You recently have done a collaboration with Crédits last year, which is an auction house. And again, contextually, here we are in an art fair, a commercial entity. And I find that it's such an important platform to be in for women artists. I want to know from your experience showing, having collaboration with such a prestigious auction house such as Christie's, how has that kind of been rewarding to the presentation and the acknowledgement of women artists? Because you've even used an artwork by a woman artist as the poster and the cover.
So let me say that, first of all, I lost hope in many museums, and so I think that we should first of all look to each other as individuals, galleries, institutions, auction houses that have been very helpful. But I also want to say that the onus is on us, the responsibility is on all of us to exhibit, to talk about, to push women artists from the region, really Middle Eastern artists in general. The collaboration we had with Christie's was very important because we have to take advantage of every opportunity to show work. Where can we show work? Museums don't open their doors to us in London. So why don't we show works in every possible venue that will open their arms and open their hearts to us? That's one thing we should do. Another thing we should do is, honestly, auction houses have played a very important role. All the auction houses, Christie's, Sotheby's, Bonhams, they've published biographies, they've published images. Today, when you go and search for a lot of artist biographies, you'll find them in these auction houses, and you find them in the works of some pioneer galleries, Hisham Daoudi's catalogs of CMOA galleries. The catalogs are really masterpieces of work, Hisham. With the research that you invest in, the biographies of the artists, the images that they uncover, honestly, there's a lot of good happening. We're still facing a lot of old school resistance, maybe with some museums and some institutions, but the reality is we are in such a good place now, thanks to social media. By the way, I hate Instagram stories and Snapchat stories because they disappear. And they're not searchable. So my problem with Instagram stories is they're fine, but they're not searchable. Who posted that? How can I find an image? Where is that painting? And so it's good, but you have to keep screenshotting. And so I really think we should post permanent posts, what do you call them, like a post. We should go back to Facebook, go back to permanent. I mean, I think about this all the time. Like, I think about where did I see that artwork, and it's in a story and it disappeared. So it's a bit difficult.
Facebook is actually one of the most enriching platforms, a social media platform for artists. There are plenty of communities, artist groups, and
groups,
and
totally.
This has been such an important tool for myself included. And I've been following you for a while. Speaking of social media, I've also observed that you use social media for the good of getting a hold of artists and connecting with them, which eventually helps you acquiring an artwork, for example, by artists and so on. Could you elaborate on the role of social media in general, in terms of your experience with acquiring the work of women artists?
Very easy, and I think Facebook is incredible, especially with Libya, with Egypt, with Morocco. A lot of them, Syria, Lebanon, they're all on Facebook. You think of Instagram, but really Facebook still is the best source for art information. When my colleague Reem Khorshid and I, alongside Todd Rees, were working on a book, Building Sharjah, we used Facebook to ask for biographies of architects, for example, and photos. But I use Facebook a lot in social media. Even 2 weeks ago, we are rehanging the museum in Sharjah, and we didn't have biographies, dates of birth and death of Atiyat al-Ahwal from Lebanon, Aida Marini, Atiyat from Egypt, Aida Marini from Lebanon. So many artists that we didn't have their biographies and their dates of birth. Honestly, even the spelling of their name, we didn't have. And so we go online, and people like Saleh Barakat are very, very helpful. People who connect us with the artists. I mean, honestly, I mentioned Saleh, but so many people are so helpful and connect us with the families of artists to get photos, to get biographies. And we use, I think, social media as a tool to canvas what's out there and ask. I'll be asking questions next week. I'm looking for date of birth and death of Aida Marini, for example. So honestly, social media can be very helpful, can be very depressing, and can be very sad and horrible sometimes when it's misused, but can be very helpful if you're looking for information.
I honestly couldn't agree more. Social media brings this sense of community. Again, we live in an age where we cannot travel, especially in the region where we come from. It's difficult to move around because of some of the conflicts that are ongoing, some of the political conditions that we have to endure. And so social media does bring a lot of the art and knowledge to us.
What I want to add, artist number 51. I hate to reduce artists to numbers, but artist number 51, Minhat Hilmi. How did we get to know this artist? We were working on an exhibition of abstraction from the Arab world. And I said, I refuse to believe there were no abstract women artists from Egypt. So I specifically said, where are the abstract women artists from Egypt? And so this lovely Sudanese woman messaged me and said, in the 1990s, I was living in Cairo, and there was this older, nicer woman called Minhat Allah Hilmi, who was my neighbor, and she was an artist. I connect you to her grandson in Canada, who left 20 years ago. So we reached out to her. It turns out that she studied in the Slade in London in the 50s with Ibrahim al-Salahi. She was one of the most important pioneer abstract artists. But how did we get her name? Through Twitter. How did we get Naziha Salim's artwork? Through Instagram. How did we get maybe 20% of these artworks, artists? Through Facebook. So social media can be very, very helpful. And I'm sure that we're live streaming on some social media now.
I couldn't agree more. Sultan, we have been reflecting on the past 5 years since 2019, since you made the conscious decision of working on the gender parity in your collection. I want us to look forward and ask you, how do you see Barjeel moving forward 5 years from now?
That's an interesting question. Maybe it's too early to announce details, but this is not a secret that I've always wanted a museum. And so we're now working really with an architect to design a very simple museum. It's not going to be, the Centre Pompidou. It's going to be, as much as I love it, it's going to be a very simple, basic museum, what we can afford to showcase, hopefully in Sharjah and the UAE. And so I'm looking forward, Wadha, to seeing the works. Because believe it or not, there's a good 15 to 20% of the collection that I've never seen in my life. I've never seen. Because what happens is we buy the work, it arrives from Morocco, arrives from Tunis, arrives from somewhere, it goes to the warehouse, the registrar goes, opens it, checks that it's the correct work, because sometimes we were sent the wrong work, checks that it's the right work, checks that it's not damaged, and then I don't want to go and say, I was traveling, I come back and say, open everything, let me see everything. So it's very, very, sometimes it's very special to see works. So I'm looking forward to seeing the artworks. So 5 years from now, I hope we have a museum. I hope you can visit the Barjeel Museum and that you can see works by women and men. I hope that we can go beyond gender parity. I hope that we can think, let's say, of other minorities without going into details. Okay, let's also think of being proactive. Let's think of thinking of the future. What else is there? What about materiality? What about investing in scholarship? Honestly, one day I hope I can stop buying work and then investing in the scholarship, because you can invest in buying the work, but then you invest in the work itself by commissioning text, commissioning scholarship, which is what I'd love to do one day. And then maybe hand over to somebody else because I'm tired.
And you recently has launched an initiative with Fikr Institute, if I'm not mistaken, to dedicate a research project on the study of women artists. Is that correct?
That's very right. So Fikr Institute is a research center founded by Dubai Abul Hol in Dubai. It's one of the most beautiful libraries. Must visit when you go to Dubai next. Okay, yes, go to the beach, but go to Fikr, of course. And Fikr and Barjeel have come to a collaboration to publish biographies of artists. We've published Munir Al-Qazi from Kuwait, Sami Usairan Jumbalat from Lebanon. My God, who else? I forgot. A number of artists. Layla Nsair, we've just published. Sometimes this is the first ever biography of these artists. We tried to find someone to write about Jamila, zero. Nobody came, we could not find. So I am saying on the record now, if anybody thinks of someone, preferably from Algeria, who would write a biography of Jamila bint Muhammad, we are very interested, preferably a woman, always a woman, preferably from Algeria, to write about Jamila bint Muhammad. So we are looking to publish more biographies of women artists. So that's something that we are investing in the coming, hopefully, months and years.
It's a wonderful initiative, and I think it's so important to actually publish more on women artists, because that's what brings acknowledgement and creates value for them to enter institutions and to be celebrated and to be acknowledged. I now would like to open the floor for questions, if you're willing to answer some questions. Mr. Ali.
Sure.
I'm going to ask for the first question, Sultan. Which year did you start to buy your first painting? When did you realize that you need women artists in your collection? And what time, what happened to you at that time? What happened in your head?
There was just too much testosterone in the galleries. There was too much male energy. When you enter the museum, you just feel something is wrong there. There's an imbalance in the universe. So you just feel it. I think it's a feeling that just grew in me, that there's something wrong, that there's just, it's a feeling inside. And I realized this because I'm a man, and I realized that, well, I feel like, is it too easy to buy what the galleries or what auction houses or what the world is offering you? Do you have to push back and really search under the surface to look for leading women artists? But at what point? I think it started 2016, 17, but only in 2019 that we took a decision, because we asked a lot of people. You can see, I think, where is this? You see the date here, August 2019. This is when we made the announcement that we will never show less than 50% women. And I did this law, very after consulting with a lot of artists and a lot of scholars. And so it wasn't an easy decision, but I think it was the right decision.
Bravo.
I just have a question. When you envision the modern female artist, what is exactly the period? Because we know that the contemporary stage is very, very strong for our female artists. So what is exactly, how do you define those female modern artists?
Okay, so yeah, Institut Mondagab is very, very important. My education was largely thanks to my visits as a student to IMA. But let me tell you, a lot of people were very dismissive of early or modern women artists. they have the same 5-6 names. Unfortunately, when you ask Westerners who are the women artists you know from the modern period, they tell you Frida Kahlo and maybe another name, maybe Georgia O'Keeffe, but then they stumble. And this happens, and I don't want this to happen with the Arab artists. I don't want people to think of, I won't say their names, that one and that one and that one, and I won't say their names. But these are the 4 or 5 women artists that people think of course, all over and over and over. So I want us to go beyond the famous 4 or 5 women artists from the Arab world. And right now, at the museum, let me tell you the number of women artists we have from the 30s. From the 30s, we have I'timad Trabulsi, 1930 painting. We have Blanche Ammoun from Lebanon, 1939. We have Bibi Zoghbi, 1930s. We have Sophie Halabi from Palestine, 1930s. We have Marie Haddad from Lebanon, 1930s. We have, my God, so many, like we're discovering the number of women artists, Zulfa Saadi, Lydia Atta, so many women artists who are active in the 30s, which is a decade that a lot of people will not even think of. They think of 60s when they think of women, 60s, 70s maybe. But nobody thinks, if you push back 30 years, who was around? Who was doing work? What if we push back earlier? What was there exactly? Kawkab al-Assal, we have from that period, from Egypt. My God, can't remember. Awatif al-Nahal. Have you ever heard of these names? These are all women that we're discovering through research from the 1930s, from Egypt, Palestine, Syria, Lebanon. And there is from Tunis, I forgot her name. So many women artists. And Iraq, of course.
Can I go ahead? Yes. Hey, thank you both for a really enlightening conversation. You spoke very eloquently about the collective responsibility we have as an art community in terms of supporting these female Arab artists. And I'm curious what you think in terms of how we can hold the industry accountable when things like what's been happening to Samia Halabi. She just had another exhibition pulled. This is after the Indiana retrospective was pulled. At the same time, last year she broke records with her piece that sold at Sotheby's, almost $500,000 US. Something's obviously not right, and I'm curious how we can collectively hold the industry accountable for not treating female Arab artists this way. The way she described it on her Instagram was like a sports event being canceled. It's something that we can't accept from the industry.
I completely agree, and a huge respect to Samia Halabi and all the work that she's been doing, and her really her activism when it comes to Palestine, but also Cuba and so many other causes in the 50 years ago. I think it's unacceptable. I think honestly, I'll never visit the museums that that canceled her shows. I have no interest in communicating with them or lending to them. So I would, in myself, think of you see young people doing a boycott list. In my mind, I'll just never work with them again. But maybe it's important to look forward. Maybe it's important for us to think of our institutions, like Mathaf in Qatar. There's like the Loul collection, like museums coming up in the UAE. What about our own institutions? So yes, definitely we're horrified by what happened to Samia in the past year or so, and unfortunately Palestinians especially are they've been the subject of discrimination by the academic and artistic community. Thank you so much.
Do you think it's possible to publish one day a history art book rewriting history? Because all art books write history from one point of view. Is it possible to rewrite history?
There's a lot of institutions that are publishing books. I want to think of Sharjah Art Foundation, for example. Sheikh Ahour and Dr. Omar Khulaif has been doing amazing work with publishing histories of artists like Ibrahim Salahi, Ahmed Morsi, my God, Yusuf Kamel, so many artists, Mohammed Melehi, Amal Qannawi from Egypt. So yes, definitely we should focus on writing, but honestly even small biographies will be very helpful. Because talking to artists that are around today, like Ziad Dalloul, like like yourself, we've had a number of artists who are here. The work that Rose Isa is doing, my God, Rose Isa is an incredible, incredible person. So honestly, what people like Rose have been doing, Nada Shabout, Salwa Maqdadi, what am I saying? Some giants live amongst us today. And there a lot of good work has been done. So hopefully we continue this work. I'm now almost 50 years old, so what about the younger people here in their 20s and 30s? Maybe it's time for them also to step up and take responsibility. But thank you so much for being here.